Time for that June reading wrap-up. Starting with those 2-star reviews. After Dark by Minka Kent. This story was meant to be a dark thriller. To be fair to After Dark, I really only got to chapter 4 or 5 before I put it down. It just wasn't grabbing and holding my attention. If a thriller's not actively encouraging you to turn those pages to find out what happens next, I just don't think it's doing its job. And I really do feel like 4 to 5 chapters is more than enough time to figure that out. Moving into 3-star reads. Off the Deep End by Lucinda Berry. There were elements of this that were great. Like, as far as a general thriller goes, I think it's a page turner. I think it has a couple of interesting, unique elements that might engage normal readers. For me, there are just a lot of problematic elements, starting with the fact that this felt like a Jodi Picoult story. For those who don't know, Jodi wrote like My Sister's Keeper and a bunch of other controversial, quote-unquote, empathetic takes on people with autism, people who like designer babied, all this other stuff. She like sensationalized it and made it into a story plotline without really doing like adequate research or evaluation. So it's like poor representation that was mass read by a lot of people and often was like offensive and stereotypical. And I'm getting a lot of that same feeling here in Lucinda Berry's work. A mom losing a child in an especially traumatic way and saving one of the 2 children in the backseat. It just happens to be the wrong one. It doesn't feel like any of that was handled well. It doesn't feel like trauma bonding was handled very well. Like, there's just a whole list of things that weren't working for me in this. Bunch of different ways characters were interacting and talking about things that I found like frustrating. Especially because for me, one of the biggest hooks was that the mother who was losing her grip on reality and kind of like falling for her son's friend who'd survived the accident is a therapist. So she knows like all the therapy talk, she knows all the common tropes and things. I know just knowing those things doesn't mean you don't fall into them. The way things were talked about and handled just didn't feel like they were engaging that element. It felt like an extra hook to get me in that wasn't executed super well. This is the second thing I read by Lucinda Berry, and like the first one, I found the ending to be like the worst part. Like, there was a lot of sensationalism built up and a lot of like shock moments. They're just too shocked, not handled delicately enough. It was a super engaging read. It was a huge page turner. I was invested, but at the same time, there were moments where I was like pulled out of the story, like, I wonder how accurate this is. This novel in particular incorporates a school shooting into it, and I felt very like icky what that meant. All those parts were not working at all. Not as nuanced as I would have liked. Editing Jess here, realizing I forgot to put in the book Lovely, Dark, and Deep by Megan Stockton. This was a very quick horror. It's only about 190 pages, which is perfect. And it focuses in on an isolated island that's evacuating before an incoming storm. Unfortunately, there is a missing child and some suspicious disappearances the local sheriff has to investigate before they can leave the island. There's really great spooky atmosphere, there's wonderful kills. It's a fun seaside slasher kind of story with just a hint of mystery surrounding the disappearances and the creatures committing the murders. I think the characters have enough personality to be fun, but not so much personality as to be distracted. I thought the style was very similar to Ania Ailborn. I think the two are quite similar and you might have crossover enjoyment there. Stockton has a lot of other horror novels and I'll have to check some more out. This one wasn't doing anything like exceptionally, which is why it's not getting an extra star, but it is working perfectly adequately, a perfectly fun, good time. Moving into 4-star reads, The Daughters of Block Island by Krista Carmen. I really enjoyed this. It's a great modern gothic tale. It's set in Rhode Island on Block Island, which is a real place, and the main creepy manor that like all the mystery and everything is surrounding actually existed on that island at one point in time, although a lot of the details have been changed. But it created a great atmospheric background. I love the fact that this was also like a mulberry winery and a bed and breakfast. I liked the 2 elder sisters running it. I liked the small town, everybody knows each other, but still somehow, some way there's secrets and power at play, and it's coming for our protagonists. Part 1, we start out with a girl who's gone through the foster system and has just found out who her biological mother is. She's coming back to Block Island to make that connection, and when she does that, she finds out that her mom had another daughter she kept, which sort of throws her into a tailspin, and she's not 100% confident about confronting, not confronting, all that kind of stuff. She writes a letter to her half-sister, and that letter gets to her half-sister and sparks her curiosity enough to come back to Block Island and sort of investigate what's really going on with her mother, her half-sister, and the island as a whole. I don't want to give too many spoilers because I think like letting the story unfold in its own time is something that some people will need. I don't care about spoilers, but I try to be sensitive when I give these summaries. I did really love this, and one of the things that really appealed to me is they keep referencing other classic Gothic works, and I even sort of liked the nod from the author, like, yes, these girls do read Gothic fiction. Yes, that's part of why they're coming up with these imaginative ideas, and yes, that's part of why there's like collective, connected world of Gothic literature, Gothic themes, Gothic tropes all wrapped in. What's holding this back from like a 5-star read for me is a lot of the repetition, a lot of like the disbelief, and sometimes like the over-referencing of these Gothic works. She mentions these works and these novels and how they remind her of what's happening now over and over and over again. And I could have used like the references cut in about half. Likewise, I could have used the I believe what's happening and I believe in ghosts, I don't believe what's happening, I don't believe in ghosts. Waffling could have been cut in half as well. First daughter in the foster care system has had a really rough life, and as such she's struggling with drug addiction, and she's about 30 days sober when she visits Block Island. What's made her turn to sobriety is that she hit and killed someone in a car wreck. She's actually waiting for her trial and the results to come in, and she's trying to like get clean because she's seen how she's ruining her own life and other people's this way, which kind of like makes our narrator feel unreliable because she does have like this addiction she's struggling with. She could be on drugs. She has this other thing inside her that's pulling her back and forth, a very sensitive time in her recovery. Sometimes I felt like we just dove too deep in it, and I wanted just a little bit more like push, just do it kind of moments. That said, almost all of my issues clear up when we move from like this first daughter into the second daughter's narrative, because she's a lot more confident, she's more decisive, she's an action-taking girly. She knows what she's seeing and what she's perceiving, she's got a great girl pal who's backing her up. All of those parts work really well, the pace speeds up dramatically. I just wish all of it had been paced like that because I almost didn't get to that part too. And like for me personally as a reader, I knew what was going to happen to this first daughter. It was not a surprise. I wasn't tense about it. So I sort of just wanted that moment to happen and us to move into the rest of the story. Maybe if you don't know what's going to happen to her and what she's going to experience, all this building will be more of something of value for you. Next is These Toxic Things by Rachel Howell Halls. This one was really fun. It's actually like two mysteries happening side by side that you're not 100% sure if all the pieces fit into one big mystery or if they're two things that are just unfortunately happening at the same time. Our character was empathetic enough that I went with her, but also like different enough to obviously be her own person, reacting in her own way very differently than how I'd react or interpret things. There was a lot of great flavor text, personality, charm. I thought both of the mysteries were good. Personally, I would have preferred if the two of them weren't either tied together or if we'd just done one of them. The only thing about that is I'm not sure that either one of these mysteries as they stand would have been enough for a full novel on their own, which is why I think she sort of like interwove them and made answers to one sort of be the red herring to the other. What really brings us into 4-star category for me is the imagined technology of like the little memory keeping virtual device. It's very reminiscent of like social media, Facebook, but also like journaling, keepsake, like we mash cut those two things together. And I always find it really interesting, like when we're talking about how we chronicle family history, feel more connected to their heritage and other people that were part of their lives, a part of bringing them into this world. But when we see it being utilized by like the main character because she has her own little memory box or whatever, it's more like she's curating her life or doing things specifically so she can or cannot add them into the box. And it feels like she is narrativizing things as they happen, like this thing that happened to me today is a historic moment. I'm gonna make it be historic. And when you're hearing like the memories played back, the events that happened in her life, you wonder like how accurate they are. Dark, it made me think very much of social media. You see this one quote unquote like candid take, but what you don't know is it was like a 3-hour long photo shoot and they went during golden hour and they did all this other reconnaissance to get this moment. Like, one of the reasons I don't personally do any kind of vlog, I can't film and experience at the same time. And I've decided being fully present in the moment and experiencing it is more important to me than having the visual proof of it for later. And whatever you choose to do is your business. And if you can do both at the same time, even better. But this book does explore that dichotomy because this woman is not always experiencing things. And even when she's not recording it for her memory box, there's a lot of things that she just like brushes off because they're not something that will be going in her memory box. It's not something she's going to want to record or remember. And I think it completely changes the context, the moments, and the intentions behind certain scenes that you might record in like a memory box. And because this is such a big, fun, interesting topic with a lot of things to chew, and they are giving us all this technology and process behind making the memory box, I feel like there's just all this extra fun thematic stuff that's not even really part of the main plot, even though it like spurs the plot on into happening. When you get to that plot point and when you find all that stuff out, there's another like darker meaning going on there too. Next is gonna be Fall of the House of Usher. This is a reread I did, and hopefully we'll be posting more stuff starting in September for like a secret project I'm working on. I understand why for a lot of people this would be a 5-star read. It's 4 stars for me because I just feel like there's something missing in it. I know that's sort of the point. You know the who, what, when, and where, but you never really have the why. I did read and review this back in 2021, and I don't think my feelings on it have changed at all, so you can check out that stuff here. Because it is a short story, it's very easy to recommend it, and there's so many free audio versions at this juncture. You can kind of like listen to it and get an atmospheric moment. And moving into those 5-star reads, The Devil and Mrs. Davenport by Paulette Kennedy. I can say with 90% confidence this is going to be my favorite read of the year. I loved all the gothic elements. I adored the 50s time period. I love the little details. The basic premise of this story, if you haven't seen it before, is there is a 50s housewife who is in like a sort of troubled marriage, and she begins to have visions of these girls who have been murdered more or less in the town around her. She finds a psychologist to help her deal with them because they're like nervous attacks and she wants them to stop. He realizes they're ESP, which is another field he studies, and like tries to train her up and help her control / engage with these powers. And you know, they're trying to solve the mystery of these girls. They're trying to like get a wrap on her powers, and she's trying to get control of her domestic situation with her 2 children. So there's a lot of moving parts that connect in like a beautiful, satisfying way, and you get a pretty good resolution, all things told, as well as like excellent tension and pacing. There wasn't a second of this where I was like, this has gone on too long, or this is too much repetition. All of it is perfect. I picked this book up specifically for the Women in Horror book club I'm part of over on the Fable app. It had been recommended to me before, but I had just been a little bit nervous to dive into it, and I thought like, oh, it's got an Audible, let's just go for it. And because I was reading it for the Fable book club, I intended to read it chapter by chapter and stop at each chapter and write a little note and participate in the book group like a good little book groupie. I was able to do that for chapters 1, 2, and 3. But then once I hit chapter 4, it hooked me and I couldn't put this book down for any. I had other things to do that day and I changed my plans, did cleaning and housework and yard work and anything else I could do that would involve me being able to still listen and finish this book. If you like 50s housewife era, if you like gothic novels, if you like stories that explore feminine rage, all of that is present, and there's so much research and detail work going into it. I can't recommend this one enough. And that's going to be everything I read in June. But talk to me. What was the favorite thing you read in June? Have you read any of the books I read this past June? Tell me all about it in those comments down below. And if you got this far into the video and have nothing else to say, leave me a sunflower emoji. And as always, keep reading.